I was working the front desk at a hotel in Amsterdam when an American businessman checked in around 10 p.m. Standard procedure. I asked for his passport and credit card. He handed them over, then asked why I needed to see his passport. I explained it's required by Dutch law for all foreign guests. He laughed and told me that was discrimination. I asked him to clarify. He said requiring passports from foreigners but not Dutch citizens was unequal treatment under the law. Most people just laugh at stories like this. I dissect the psychology behind them. If you're the kind who sees patterns beneath absurdity, you'll want to stay here. I explained that Dutch citizens are registered in our national system, so we already have their information. He wasn't having it. He pulled out his phone and started reading the Dutch Constitution out loud. In English, from what appeared to be Google Translate. He kept saying the word Gelijkheid wrong. He told me he'd studied constitutional law at a community college in Arizona and was pretty sure discrimination based on nationality violated international law. I asked if he wanted to speak to my manager. He said yes. My manager was American. When she came down and explained the same passport law in her Texas accent, he got quiet. He checked in without another word. The irony was completely lost on him. Last month, a woman from Florida tried to pay her train fine in Norway with a lengthy speech about the Americans with Disabilities Act. The inspector had asked her to move from the priority seating because she didn't have a disability placard. She showed him her Florida driver's license as proof of eligibility. 2 weeks ago, someone demanded a wheelchair ramp be installed at a 14th century castle in Portugal. When the guide explained it was a protected historical site, the tourist said that was no excuse for discrimination. The castle had stairs built in 1385, and that was just Tuesday. I work as a museum security guard in Stockholm at a modern art museum. We have a strict no photography policy in certain exhibitions because of copyright agreements with living artists. American tourists ignore this rule roughly 6 times per shift. But one guy in June took it to a new level. He was photographing a restricted installation when I approached and politely asked him to stop. He lowered his phone, looked me dead in the eye, and said, "First Amendment." I told him the First Amendment is American law and doesn't apply in Sweden. He said freedom of expression is a universal human right, and Sweden can't just opt out of the U.S. Constitution. I explained that Sweden has its own constitution and its own laws about photography and copyright. He asked me if I'd ever heard of the Declaration of Independence. I had. He proceeded to lecture me about how America invented freedom and that modern democracies are basically copying the American system. I mentioned that Sweden's parliament has been around since 1435, well before America existed. He said that didn't count because it wasn't real democracy back then. He then pointed at the art and said since he paid for his museum ticket, he owned partial rights to photograph anything in the building. I explained that's not how admission fees work. He said in America, the customer is always right. I told him to leave. He said he'd report me to the U.S. Embassy for violating his constitutional rights. On Swedish soil, I let my manager handle it from there. I drive a taxi in Prague and picked up an American couple near the Old Town Square around midnight on a Saturday. They'd been bar hopping and were pretty drunk but friendly enough. We were heading to their hotel when I took a legal right turn at a red light. In Czech Republic, this is forbidden unless there's a specific sign allowing it. I didn't realize they'd noticed until the woman shouted from the back seat that I'd just committed a crime. I tried to explain that in Prague, you can't turn right on red. The husband interrupted and said that was suppressing freedom of movement. I almost laughed. He insisted that right turn on red was a basic human right because it reduces idle time and carbon emissions. He said America implemented it for environmental reasons and Europe should follow suit. I explained that Prague is a medieval city with narrow streets and different traffic patterns. He said regulations should be universal and based on what works best. I asked him to define works best. He said, the American way, and that's why America has the best roads. I mentioned the traffic situation in Los Angeles. He said LA doesn't count because it's too big to manage. We arrived at his hotel. He tried to tip me in dollars. I explained we use crowns. He said dollars are more valuable, so I should be grateful. He left the dollars on the seat. I left them at the front desk with his room number. I'm a restaurant server in Barcelona at a traditional tapas place in the Gothic Quarter. An American family of 4 came in for dinner around 9 p.m. They sat down and immediately started complaining about the noise level. Our restaurant is small, the tables are close together, and Spanish people talk loudly over dinner. It's part of the atmosphere. The father called me over and asked if we had a quiet section. I told him no. All our tables are in the same room. He said that was discriminatory against people who require quiet environments to enjoy meals. I asked if someone in the family had a specific condition. He said no, but in America, restaurants have to accommodate different comfort levels. I explained that in Spain, restaurants aren't required to provide separate sections based on noise preference. He said that was behind the times, and Spain should modernize its equality laws. His teenage daughter told him to stop, clearly embarrassed. He ignored her and continued. He asked if I knew about the ADA. I said yes, the Americans with Disabilities Act. He said exactly, and Spain needed something similar. I informed him that Spain has its own disability laws and they're actually quite strong. He asked why we don't have quiet sections then. I explained noise preference isn't classified as a disability. He said in America, everyone's needs matter equally, implying Spain doesn't care about its citizens. He ordered patatas bravas and complained they were too spicy. He didn't tip. I worked the border control at Copenhagen Airport. An American tourist came through with a standard visa exemption that allows 90 days in the Schengen area within a 180-day period. His passport showed he'd already used 88 days this year. I stamped him in for his remaining 2 days and explained he'd need to leave the Schengen zone before Thursday. He asked why. I explained the 90-day rule. He said that was arbitrary and discriminatory against frequent travelers. I told him every country has entry limits for tourists. He said America lets tourists stay for 6 months, so Europe should do the same. I explained that European countries are sovereign nations with their own immigration laws. He said the EU should standardize with America since we're allies. I asked if he expected America to change its laws to match Europe's. He said no, because America's system works better. I asked him to define better. He said more freedom. I stamped his passport. He asked why I wasn't being more flexible since he wasn't a threat. I told him to enjoy his 2 days. I work as a tram driver in Lisbon. Portugal has strict rules about overcrowding on public transport. If the tram is at capacity, I can't let more passengers board. It's a safety regulation, and I can be fined if I violate it. One afternoon during rush hour, my tram was completely packed. An American tourist tried to board at Praça do Comércio. I told him the tram was full, and he'd need to wait for the next one in 8 minutes. He said he'd been waiting for 15 minutes already. I explained that rush hour is busy, and the next tram would likely have space. He said he paid for a transit pass, so he has a right to board any tram. I explained capacity limits aren't related to payment. They're safety regulations. He stepped closer to the door and said in America, public services are first come, first served. I pointed out he wasn't first. The tram was already full. He said the people on the tram could make room if they tried. This mindset shows up everywhere. The belief that one's personal comfort equals universal fairness. I unpack these cultural blind spots every week, and trust me, once you start noticing them, you can't unsee them. I told him Portuguese law doesn't work that way. He raised his voice and said his taxes probably pay for this tram through NATO contributions. I'm not sure he understood how NATO funding works. He demanded my employee number so he could file a complaint about unequal access to public services. I gave him my number. He took a photo of the tram number and said he'd be contacting the American consulate. The next tram arrived 6 minutes later, nearly empty. He didn't get on. He was too busy yelling on his phone about discrimination. I manage a pharmacy in Brussels, and Belgium has strict regulations about prescription medications. An American woman came in with a U.S. prescription for controlled antibiotics. I explained I couldn't fill an American prescription and she'd need to see a Belgian doctor. She said that was medical discrimination. I asked her to clarify. She said denying her medication based on where the prescription came from was unequal healthcare access. I explained that prescription authority is based on licensed medical practice within Belgium. American doctors aren't licensed to practice here. She said her doctor was Harvard-trained and should be recognized internationally. I told her that's not how medical licensing works in Europe. She said the EU should have reciprocal agreements with the US. I mentioned we have our own medical standards. She asked if I was saying American medicine is inferior. I said no. I was saying American prescriptions aren't valid in Belgium. She asked to speak to the head pharmacist. I was the head pharmacist. She asked if there was someone more senior available. There wasn't. She said she'd report me to the European Health Commission for discrimination. I'm not sure that organization exists the way she thinks it does. She left and returned an hour later with a Belgian prescription from a local clinic. She didn't apologize. I work as a rental agent in Berlin. An American man was looking at an apartment in Kreuzberg. Beautiful place, renovated, great location. He loved it. We went through the standard application process. In Germany, landlords can request information about employment, income, and previous rental history. It's all legal under German housing law. He submitted his application, and I requested proof of income and a Schufa credit report. He refused. He said asking for financial information was discriminatory and violated equal housing laws. I explained this is standard practice in Germany. He said in America, landlords can't ask for excessive financial details because of fair housing laws. I told him German housing law is different. He said Germany should align with American standards since our laws are more equal. I asked him how preventing landlords from assessing financial stability makes housing more equal. He didn't have an answer, but insisted it was just better. I told him without the required documents, I couldn't process his application. He said he'd pay 6 months up front in cash if I skipped the discrimination checks. I explained that's not how it works, and I could actually get in legal trouble for bypassing the standard process. He said I was choosing to discriminate. I told him I was following German law. He found another apartment through an agent who apparently bent the rules. I heard he got evicted 3 months later for unpaid rent. I work the front desk at a hostel in Krakow, Poland. We have a strict 11 p.m. quiet hours policy. It's posted everywhere, it's in the booking confirmation, and I mention it at check-in. An American guy checked in around 4 p.m., said he understood, no problem. At 11:30 p.m., I got complaints from 3 rooms about loud music and talking. I went upstairs and found him in the common area with speakers playing music and drinking with 2 other travelers. I asked him to keep it down per our quiet hours policy. He said quiet hours were authoritarian and against the spirit of hostel culture. I explained the policy exists because some guests want to sleep. He said people who want silence should book hotels and hostels should be democratic spaces. I told him democracy doesn't mean ignoring rules everyone agreed to. He said he didn't really agree because he didn't think the rule was fair. I pointed out he signed the hostel agreement at check-in. He said signing something doesn't mean you consent to discrimination. I asked how a quiet hours policy is discrimination. He said it discriminates against social people and favors antisocial people. That's not what discrimination means. I told him to turn off the music, or I'd have to ask him to leave. He said in America, hostels don't have authoritarian policies, and customers are treated equally. I mentioned that American hostels absolutely have quiet hours. He said, "Not the good ones." I gave him one more warning. He turned off the music but spent another 20 minutes loudly explaining to his friends how European hostels don't understand customer service equality. Next morning, he left a one-star review saying the hostel discriminates against friendly people. I'm a flight attendant for a Nordic airline. We fly primarily between European cities. On a flight from Oslo to Athens, an American passenger flagged me down before takeoff. He was in an economy seat and wanted to move to business class. I explained business class was fully booked. He said one seat appeared empty from what he could see. I told him it might be a passenger running late. He said that was inefficient, and empty seats should be redistributed equally. I explained seats are assigned based on ticket purchases. He said once the door closes, unoccupied seats should be first come, first served. I told him that's not our airline policy. He said it should be common sense and equal opportunity seating. I explained business class passengers paid significantly more for their tickets. He said that's classist, and everyone on the plane is equal. I pointed out he chose to purchase an economy ticket. He said he bought the cheapest option because he expected equal treatment regardless of price. I told him if seat class didn't matter, business class wouldn't exist. He said airlines should abolish class systems and charge everyone the same price for the same flight. I asked if he'd be willing to pay business class prices for economy service. He said no, because that would be unfair. The business class passenger arrived 2 minutes before door closure. The American spent the rest of the flight typing aggressively on his laptop. I'm fairly sure he was writing a complaint email about discriminatory seating policies. Last summer, I worked as a tour guide in Reykjavik for a Northern Lights tour company. An American woman booked a tour but wanted special accommodations. She asked if we could drive to a better location, just for her because she'd paid the same price as everyone else and deserved equal access to the best views. I explained we take all guests to the same, scientifically optimal location based on weather and light pollution. She said that was unfair because some people in the group might have better eyesight and therefore see the lights better. I wasn't sure how to respond to that. She suggested we should have separate tours based on visual ability to ensure equal experiences. I told her nature doesn't work that way, and everyone sees the lights as their eyesight allows. She said the tour company should provide accommodations, so everyone has an identical experience. I asked how we'd accomplish that. She didn't have an answer but insisted it was the principle. She showed up for the tour wearing sunglasses at 11 p.m. in the Arctic winter. She complained she couldn't see the northern lights clearly. I suggested removing her sunglasses. She said she had light sensitivity and needed them for equal access. The lights were spectacular that night. She gave us 3 stars because her experience wasn't as good as others due to our lack of accommodations. She was wearing sunglasses at night in Iceland. In winter, I run a small bookshop in Dublin. An American tourist came in looking for a specific book we didn't have in stock. I offered to order it for him. He asked how long it would take. I said probably 5 to 7 business days. He said that was discrimination against tourists because locals can come back anytime. I explained tourists and locals have the same wait time for orders. He said the impact is different, so the treatment is unequal. I suggested he could buy the book elsewhere or have it shipped to his hotel. He said I should keep tourist-friendly inventory to ensure equal access to literature. I told him I can't stock every book ever published. He said I should at least stock important American literature, since Americans are significant contributors to global culture. I asked which book he wanted. He said it was a self-published novel by his cousin in Wisconsin. He genuinely expected a small Irish bookshop to carry it. He left disappointed and told me Irish bookstores don't value diversity. His Cousin's book had 12 reviews on Amazon. The E2O thing about Americans abroad and equality isn't that they don't believe in it. It's that they think equality means everyone should get exactly what they want, when they want it, how they want it. And if a European country has different systems, different laws, different cultural norms, well, that must be discrimination. Because in their mind, the American way is the default setting for human civilization, and any deviation is a glitch in the matrix. This channel isn't about mocking anyone, it's about decoding the psychology behind cultural certainty. If that kind of clarity feels rare, you'll fit right in here. And somewhere right now, an American is explaining to a confused Norwegian that having different languages is discriminatory against English speakers.